Kombucha. Cammy, you like this one? All right. That's good. This is a nice solid exploration.
This grain, sorry, the water, that'll just be grains. It doesn't become
No, it won't form that. So that's also a Scoby, but these Scobies literally form little crystals, and the crystals just drop off, and they grow bigger, and then another one drops off. And it's the same thing with milk and water. They almost create these little spores, and they just drop off, and the spores grow. Some of the grains grow bigger, some are smaller. Then you've got baby ones that then grow into bigger ones. So it's like little babies happening. Excuse me, my throat is a bit hoarse. So kombucha, regular kombucha and Jun kombucha. Kombucha, I mean, kombucha is a little bit more intensive. It's longer, but it's pretty easy. I mean, once you get everything set up, it's pretty easy. It's just not as, I mean, you could argue kefir is a bit more of a princess and needs more maintenance. Kombucha is like you make it, it takes about 7 to 14 days. Jun is maybe 10 to 14. Regular kombucha is 7 to 10.
So is this something that you would implement after the GAPS diet as well?
It's the same deal. I mean, any fermented food or probiotic or strong probiotic, and really go down the GAPS diet or some protocol to heal the lining first. Collagen supplementation is excellent, and colostrum supplementation.
If this poos are good now, because when they say that when you get little bits in your poo, and its poos are better and they're nice formation,
yes.
Does that show a sign that leaking
Yeah.
is on?
I mean, it's a good sign.
Yeah.
You might have to work with a medical specialist, but if you get the smiley little poos, that's a good sign. It's not loose.
A medical specialist can help you with that.
Well, it's a really tough one, isn't it? There's gastroenterologist. I don't know. I'm a scientist, guys. Like my background's in food science, so as much as I'd like to kind of go down those medical issues, I'm not qualified to do that. I can give you, guidelines to help you to make these fermented foods and master them and use them for your benefit, but I'm not a doctor, so I can't help you there. Yep, that's cool. So kombucha.
So Yun kombucha is a different culture.
Yes. So listen to this, guy. So kombucha is like your, I guess the hero product, and then Jun kombucha is like a cousin of kombucha. We don't actually know whether they were adapted from the same culture, whether they're different, but we do know they came from somewhere in China. So that's the origin.
And could you make kombucha with different tea instead of black tea?
Hold that thought, I'll come back to that question. So there's two types. So there's one that's made with regular tea and sugar, and then Jun that's made with green tea and honey. What I recommend now is whatever that culture is fed off, stick to it. So if it's a Jun culture, keep giving it honey and green tea. If it's a kombucha culture, keep giving it sugar and normal tea.
Which is the best?
I favor Jun because I like the taste. But in terms of when we looked at the different bacteria and yeast in the product, they are different. But again, it's not really a probiotic per se. The only probiotic organism in kombucha is really Saccharomyces. So it's the yeast that is the probiotic.
So is it best, which, I mean, these two would be better than,
I mean,
Herbal tea and it tasted really nice.
yes, it's same question. We'll come back to that question. It's the same question as Antonio, but we'll explore that in a sec. So I just want you guys to make sure you're using the same culture for the same food. If there's anything you take away from fermentation, is consistency is the key. So we're tasting Jun. Is this Jun? Jun. So we're tasting Jun.
It's like a vinegary taste.
I think they're both the same. It's purely going to be a flavor difference. They've both got a lot of Saccharomyces yeast, which is a good thing.
This tastes like almost like apple cider vinegar.
Yeah,
compared to the other one.
yeah. It's very vinegary because you've got gluconobacteria, you've got acetobacteria that produce vinegar and producing these sour tastes. You like it?
Yes,
And you've got the fruitiness that's coming from the fruity esters that the bacteria and yeast produce, like Pitchia, which is a nice yeast that produces that fruity taste in beers that you might try sometimes. So there's heaps of goodness, but just bear in mind, I don't think it's purely, it's a bit sour. Wrong hole. I don't think it's classically a probiotic. I think the benefits are really going to come from your short chain fatty acids, acetate. Because acetate is one of these in kombucha. In kombucha. So think of kefir as being lots of probiotic organisms, kombucha being more a prebiotic in terms of this short chain fatty acid acetate, and maybe some Saccharomyces yeast that could be beneficial. The one that people talk about in kombucha is called Saccharomyces boulardii. I haven't found it. So what we'll do is we'll get someone up to finish the kombucha for us. Any takers? Cami, you come up. My goal is to at least get most of you guys up today. So Cami, you come around this side so the team can see you. So what I want you to do is, that's your kefir Scoby there. So I want you to cut that, put that in there, and then I've made some sweet tea, which is 2 tea bags, if you want to write the ratios down. 2 tea bags, 1/4 cup of sugar, and 1 litre of water. It's on the website as well. And so you can brew the tea, make sure you cool it down. So we've made this tea and we've actually cooled it down. 1 litre of water. Yeah. So you're brewing the tea up. Now we'll come, yep, you can, yep. So what you can do is you can use this spoon. How's your chopstick skills? Good?
Now, do you use normal tea bags or are you using the
organic?
newer ones that haven't got plastic in them?
We use organic, and I think it's like unbleached.
Mm-hmm.
So what brand do we use? Unbleached, isn't it? It's unbleached. I can't remember the brand. So what?
The bags have got plastic in them now, they say.
Yeah, it can be an issue. So I'll come back to Antonio's question. I think someone else asked a question about using different types of teas. So this fermentation will take you about 7 or so days. And this is what we call a batch fermentation. Every batch fermentation that you do, you end up with a spare Scoby. So you'll get that Scoby that's in there, another Scoby will grow on the top. Is anybody making kombucha, just out of curiosity? You aware? Making it? No? So you'll get another Scoby that's forming on the top. You can take that Scoby and reserve 100 mils of tea, because in that starter, the most important part of that starter is the 100 mils of liquid, not the bits of sugar in the Scoby. So all the Scoby is bacteria making carbohydrates. Bacteria and yeast making carbohydrates. They're essentially making their own house. They're making a biofilm.
And it doesn't matter if you use stainless steel.
No,
Great.
doesn't matter. Perfectly fine.
That's what I do, seriously.
So another tip is to make sure you just give this a little bit of a shake. Or you can get a spoon and give it a stir, because yeast cells are heavy. And what they do is 100 times bigger than bacteria. They sink to the bottom. So what we want to do is just agitate it to make sure that yeast is incorporated evenly into the mixture. So literally now all we're going to do is we're going to leave this for 7 days. And what I think is when you come to around day 3 or so, have a taste, and you can stop the fermentation when you're ready, your palate.
Yeah.
The longer you leave it, the more vinegary and sour it will become. So it's purely up to you. It's a choose your own adventure on how sour and what flavor profile you want. So this is beautiful with fermentation, is you can custom make and tailor to your own palate. If the milk kefir is too strong in flavor, change up the fermentation, shorten the fermentation time. If the kombucha now is too sour, shorten up the fermentation time. And it's always going to be different based on seasons, weather patterns. The best thing is to taste and taste often. Whatever ferments you do, taste often. Stop the ferment when you're ready with that taste profile, when it's acceptable. Let's come back with that spare Scoby you have, reserve 100 mils of that tea for the next batch. Now if you've got a spare Scoby and a spare starter tea, you can then experiment with different types of teas. But there's no guarantee that that tea that you're using is going to work. There might be some oil in the tea or some compound in the tea that somehow disrupts the fermentation, disrupts the bacteria, and then the batch doesn't work and it goes moldy. So that's the watch out when you are experimenting with different types of teas.
Have you done different types of tea?
I'm a real purist. I stick to the pure stuff. I'm so busy, I don't experiment too much when it comes to different styles of kombucha. I just like the pure stuff. We're going to come back to that in a sec. So, is that crystal clear? So if you've got a spare, have a play around. Sorry, I've got a bit of a cold. I talk way too much. So, if you've got a spare, play around with different flavors of kombucha, different teas. If it doesn't work, so what? Throw it out, start again. The way that kombucha spoils, and it can be a little bit tricky, and most people muck it up, is because they don't get the ratios right. So it's 100 mils of starter tea to a litre of tea. So as long as you maintain that ratio, it is near impossible to spoil your kombucha, because it's just the fermentation is going to be too rapid and too sour to allow mold to grow. The way we kill mold is with acid. Most of the time when people muck it up is they don't use the tea and they just throw the Scoby in without putting the 100 mils of tea, or they buy a Scoby.
So it's something in the tea that helps. So you couldn't just pour water in.
No, you need, there's bacteria and yeast in the liquid as well, and they're different to the back.
Actual tea itself,
I mean, the tea has the food. I mean, it has the tannins that the bacteria use. But really, the inoculation of the actual fermentation is coming from that starter tea that you reserve. So the way people muck it up is they get this from us, 100 mils of starter tea, and then they try and do a 5 litre batch in one go. Now that ratio is wrong. So I will touch really quickly, if you guys are interested, on batch versus continuous ferment.
yes, because I've got one of those.
You got one of these? So, if you want to make batch ferments and do it every 7 days, you do it this way. If you are drinking lots of kombucha and you've got a family that is guzzling kombucha like no tomorrow, you do what we call a continuous brew. So you make this the first one. So you buy the culture from us, you made your first litre. Now what you want to do is reserve 500 mils of that batch once it's complete. Then you brew up 4.5 litres of tea in the same ratios. Does that make sense? Let the tea cool down. So 500 mils we're going to take and we're going to second ferment it. That's for later. 500 mils of the sweet tea is in here. Cool down the tea, put the 4.5 litres in, and then you let that ferment for another 7 days. And taste after, it might be ready sooner. Yeah? Day 3, start tasting. Once it's ready, now the batch is ready to continuous ferment.
But you shouldn't put lemon or anything else like that in there.
First ferments are always pure.
Yeah.
Second ferments, you can get fanciful
And
with
where
it.
do you put the second, like you'll take it out and then you put it somewhere else and do the second ferment?
You could, we've got bottles. Go see my mum downstairs. We've got these beautiful bottles. I'll talk about bottles in detail pretty soon. But yeah, just use a bottle, decant it, just spigot it into a bottle. Half of it kept for second fermentation, or you can consume it, and the rest of it for the continuous ferment. Now what you want to do is, so you've got a 5 litre batch now in there. Is everybody with me?
Yeah.
So there's 5 litres in there, it's fermented. Now, whatever you take out to drink, so you take a glass of 250 mils out to drink or consume or second ferment, you immediately have some sweet tea on standby and you just simply put it straight back in.
So that's continuous.
That's continuous. So what that will do, that means that every day it's fermenting. So whatever you take out, you put back in, but never take out more than half.
If you do it like that, like a continuous batch, like you said, is the Scoby then eventually growing too big and you have to take it off?
So you get layers upon layers forming.
Yeah.
And what you can do is you can just pull those top layers out, or I actually prefer to sort of try and get into the lower layers if you can. So if you lift it up and then you pull the bottom layers out.
So take the bottom layers
Yes.
out instead of the top layers.
Yes. It's okay. I mean, as long as your ratios of tea is right, that Scoby is really superficial. I mean, it's not super important. Most of the bacteria and yeast are in the liquid itself.
So,
mm.
first ferment, it's like when you want to do a continuous brew, you take out half of it, 500, and then you can put 4.5 in for the other 7 days.
Yes.
Then if you're going to continuously do it after that, you can't take, you just take out half of that 2.5.
Yep, so whatever you take out, you immediately put back in.
So can I take out 4 and then put 4 back in?
If you've got a 5 litre batch, you never take out more than 2.5.
Got it.
Yeah?
Okay.
Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah.
Yep, so no more than 50%. Put it back on a bit.
Got
Can't
it.
breathe. Right, who wants to demo second fermentation? Who haven't I picked on? Maybe I'll pick on this lovely lady here. You want to come up?
I don't even know where I'm going.
Okay, I'll very gently guide you through the process. Okay. All right, Antonio, I'll get you to